In the next 72 hours, all other things being equal, the finance minister is expected to present the media budget review to Parliament. Already, the minority has been talking and explaining why they have worries about certain proposals we're to expect in the media budget review. We'll be discussing that tonight here on Business Focus, together with some other issues relating to the fisheries sector and the dwindling contribution of that sector to the gross domestic product of the economy is becoming worrying. We'll talk about the fisheries sector this evening as we zoom in into sector-by-sector analysis of the economy. My name is Alfred Okansi. Welcome to Business Focus. Going to take a roundup of the headlines that made the news over the week in the world of business. All right, so those were some of the news that made headlines in the world of business. Now, we're live also on DSTV channel 279 all across the world, on TV3 Ghana, on Facebook. Feel free and share your thoughts with us as we come into the real economy beyond the political economy. The minority in Parliament has been talking, but before we hear from the minority, there's a statement that's just come through from the Central Bank, the Bank of Ghana, And if you recall the issues with Unibank some months ago, attempting to acquire some shares in ADB and the back and forth. So there is a statement that on that particular issue, Bank of Ghana annuls the acquisition of shares of ADB Bank Limited held by Belstar Capital Limited, Starmount Development Company Limited, SIC Financial Services Limited, and EDC Investment Limited. So this is the headline of this press release that just come through from the central bank. They say the Bank of Ghana has today made an order pursuant to Section 55 of the Banks and Specialized Deposit Taking Institutions Act 2016, Act 93021, annul the acquisition by Belstar Capital Limited, Starmount Development Limited, and SIC Financial Services Limited and EDC Investments Limited of all shares held by them in the ADB Bank Limited and all transactions undertaken in respect of the relevant shares. 2. Prohibit the exercise by Belstar, Starmount, SIC FSL, and EDC of any of the voting rights or any other right in respect of the relevant shares. And 3. Prohibit the directors appointed by the parties specified above to the board of the ADB from acting as directors of ADB. Now, the order takes immediate effect following the initial public offering undertaken in respect of ADB in 2016. Belstar and Starmount directly acquired 24% and 11% respectively of issued shares in ADB. Now, here's the trick. It has actually come to the notice of the Bank of Ghana that Belstar and Starmount are affiliates, and unknown to the Bank of Ghana, they entered into agreement with SIC FSL and EDC to acquire additional shares in ADB in the IPO. These agreements, in addition to the direct acquisitions by Belstar and Starmount, resulted in a direct and indirect holding by these companies of over 50%. Now, if you realize, that was what characterized this whole move by that's Unibank to acquire ADB. Now, that is the development to this. So the Bank of Ghana now has annulled the acquisition of shares of ADB Limited that's held by these three companies I've mentioned. This is just news coming through. We're going to be getting into a lot more of it in our subsequent bulletins. But now let's hear from the minority in Parliament talking about the roundtable discussion they had today about the state of the economy.
We expect more unproductive anti-business killer taxes that the government is going to likely impose coming Thursday. The first one is an increase in value-added tax, and I expect that people of this country be aware that this government inherited Ghana Infrastructure and Investment Fund. VAT proceeds of about 2.5% of the total VAT is supposed to go into the Ghana Infrastructure and Investment Fund. They have all of a sudden decided to stop allocating that money to the value-added to the Ghana Infrastructure and Investment Fund, and they have allocated it to the budget. So already the argument that they want additional 2.5% VAT to support the budget is flawed. They have taken the Ghana Infrastructure and Investment Fund money already to them. Government is putting in place measures to introduce a minimum corporate income tax of 2.5% on turnover for all companies, irrespective of whether they make profit or loss. In essence, this is like the flat rate that imposes a presumptive tax regime designed for small and medium-sized enterprises. The Akufo-Addo government is set to impose an excise tax of 10% on luxury vehicles. That is, vehicles with engine capacity above 3.5 cc. Not long ago, the VAT on fee-based financial services and real estate, they are contemplating bringing them back. So the question is, why did you remove it in the first place? And then you turn around to say that you are going to bring it back. We are all watching them. We are watching. The next point is an increase in communication service tax from the current 6%. So our friends in the telco business, communication service tax is going to go up from 6%.
Councillor Toforson speaks for the minority in finance. He's also the ranking member of the Finance Committee of Parliament, a former Deputy Finance Minister in the ex-Mahama administration. addressing the president. I've been joined in studio by Dusa Korie. He's a financial analyst and a lecturer at the Economics Department, University of Ghana, Legon. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. You have been listening to the minority in Parliament raise these concerns about the fiscal pressures they say is mounting due to the public debt. Now, when this comes from a politician, you have people react to it differently. But let's see if the facts out of what Councillor Ato Forson said, juxtapose it to the real economy and what's happening there. Does it reflect the reality of the situation?
Exactly so. In 2016, things were very bad, and I think I was in your studio here to give viewers about the state of the economy. I mean, an overview of the fiscal position. Right. An economy where, after paying just 3 items in the budget, everything is gone.
True.
Your public debt as a ratio of GDP was 73%. So, when you meet such a situation and you want to manage it, you want to solve the problem, it will take you some time. So when the new administration took over and they wanted to, maintain fiscal deficit, they also, in the process, introduced a number of programs and projects that required money.
Heavy expenditure-based projects.
Yes, I mean, if you free SHS, you need money for it. So the government, finds itself in the position, first of all, you came to meet a very difficult economy, challenging fiscal position, and you've made a number of promises. And I said that in their first budget, I thought they would slow things down. I mean, a number of taxes abolished, a number of programs introduced. I was even surprised that the free SHS was introduced in the first year. However, I thought they had some money somewhere, and now all these policies are in place. The one district, one factory has not even come yet. And so there's pressure on the fiscal position. There's pressure mounting. Of course, if you introduce a number of policies, your money is not coming. The interest alone, this year, we are going to pay 14 billion Ghana cedis on just the interest. We have not even talked about the principal. Interest on the loans that we have borrowed so far. So the 14 billion can do a whole lot of things. Now, this year, the VAT tax revenue is just 10.8 billion Ghana cedis.
For the first half of 2018?
No, for the whole of 2018.
That's the projection.
Yes, the projection. 2017 was 8.5 billion. So if you even use all the VAT revenue to pay your interest, you still have
some more to pay for.
To pay for.
But see,
so that's the position.
The minority is talking about the fact that, look, government should just be bold, come to Ghanaians and say, some of our promises during the electioneering campaign was too capital and expenditure intensive, and so we cannot do them right now. Forgive us, we're sorry, and then move on instead of trying to do it at the expense of the fiscal consolidation mechanism or policy that we've been pursuing over the period. Is it a proposal you would consent to? At what cost politically?
I don't think there's a fiscal consolidation problem here. Remember that we are still under the IMF program, and they will check government expenditure. The problem coming out here is that government is prioritizing certain programs and projects and sacrificing the capital expenditure. The capital expenditure has been maintained at 6 billion for 3 years in a row. And, so when you are spending on other programs that are not too directly productive, then you find yourself in a situation. But I think that I agree to some extent that when you come to meet a difficult economy, you make it known. Somebody will say that you are washing your dirty linen in public, but I'm telling you, the IMF staff, they already know these figures. So
they know what's happening.
They know what is happening. In fact, sometimes they collect their figures before the budget is read.
Absolutely.
And so I thought we could slow down a little bit. I thought that this new administration could. We all know, I mean, we've been talking about how difficult the economy was. So you tell Ghanaians that things are very bad. So we want to take our time and then do the thing systematically, But the number of promises were too many, and they had to, embark on them. And of course, there was also so much pressure coming from the opposition. Of course, then this will not leave them.
Well, you can see extensively from Ghanaians, who received those promises.
Ghanaians
high state of expectancy.
Ghanaians voted for this new administration, particularly because of unemployment. Basically, most people wanted jobs, and you promised them jobs. So obviously, they'll vote for you by promising them jobs. So when you come And the one district, one factory, which is supposed to create more jobs, has not yet, been implemented. But of course, we have the Nation Builders Course, which is employing 100,000 graduates. We also have the Planting for Food and Food and Jobs, which is also employing many Ghanaians. So the position is that the government should have made known, to Ghanaians how difficult the fiscal position was, and take their time step by step, and take their objectives, their programs to achieve the objectives, and go systematically instead of introducing a number of promises in the system.
We're going to take the reminders of, and as we always do, just to keep our viewers also following the fiscal targets captured in the 2018 budget, which, all other things being equal, there's going to be reviews of some of those targets in the mid-year budget review. So take a look at what was first captured in the 2018 budget that's presented by the finance minister last year. So inflation now for June 2018 is 10%. Up by 0.2% last month, which was 9.8% in May. Now up by 0.2%. Bank of Ghana, that's the policy rate. That's the rate at which the Bank of Ghana lends to commercial banks at 17%, even though we haven't seen any reflective reduction in cost of credit by commercial bank. They have various reasons why they do so. Winslow Sakifio believes that we should have seen a reduction in the cost of credit by now by commercial banks, which I think I agree with him. Overall GDP growth rate of 6.8%, non-oil GDP growth rate of 5.4%, MPR inflation rate of 8.9%. These are the targets, macroeconomic targets captured in the 2018 budget, as you see on your screens right there. You also have the average inflation rate of 9.8%, which the minority says might be missed. Fiscal deficit for 4.5% of GDP, and the primary balance surplus of 1.6% GDP. That's got foreign assets to cover at least 3.5 months of import of goods and services. Winslow Sakifio is joining me in studio. He's the head of Capital Markets Affairs Bank. Winslow, thank you for joining us. It's one thing I agree with you that we should have had a reduction in the interest rates by commercial banks charged on loans. Why? So why are we where we are now?
I think it has to do with sustainability. If they reduce interest rates on their loans, is it something that they can sustain? And it depends on how credible the current MPC rate is. We are currently at 17. It's been falling.
What's the credibility question about the current policy rate? Because the Monetary Policy Committee will start meeting this week.
Yes, and they'll come out
already. You started projecting that there's going to be a reduction in the policy rate. What's the credibility question about this, really?
You see, the banks are supposed to believe the policy rate. When I say believe, they want a policy rate that is stable. So they don't want to see a situation where they reduce their interest rate and then the policy rate starts going up because inflation issues and then the currency and all that.
Right.
And it looks like there are still weaknesses in the financial sector. Non-performing loans, even though they have gone down, it's still trending very, very high.
Okay.
So you don't want to be a bank that would drop your rates and then suddenly you'll be confronted with a lot of risk in the system, which will mean that you would underprice your loans, which will go against the bank at the end of the day.
I see. So with hearing from the minority, now let me bring you into the major discussion now. Do the developments in the economy threaten the fiscal credibility that we're enjoying now as a country?
Okay, so
maybe either of you could.
I thought.
This is not what you're leaving up to, and then.
Well, the fiscal position in an economy is just referring to your revenue and expenditure. When we say fiscal deficit, you mean the difference between your expenditure and your revenue. When your expenditure is more than your revenue, you have a deficit. Now, there are two ways of closing the deficit. Either you bring down your expenditure or you raise your revenue. And government machinery must run, so there are certain expenditure that they cannot cut. Of course, they put a cap on the transfer payments to District Assembly Common Fund.
Yes, I mean, you're talking about the cap on the
earmark funds.
The alignment the statutory funds.
Yes.
It's one question that concern the minority raised, because now a lot of government agencies are really struggling.
Of course, there was the need. I would recommend the capping of those earmarked funds, because there was a need to create some space. And I've said that before this administration came into power, after paying just 3 items, you were into negative, you know. So the fiscal position was very difficult. Now, government machinery must run. So, and the government has made a lot of promises, of course, the free SHS and all that. And therefore, that is why there's a sacrifice of capital expenditure for those social intervention programs. And another way of bridging the gap is to also raise revenue. Our tax revenue as a ratio of GDP is just 16%.
Okay.
Our domestic revenue
Are you
as a
for
ratio
that
of
proposal
GDP,
of increasing taxes, existing taxes, and introducing new ones?
I am
possibly?
for a proposal that will raise domestic revenue.
In what way?
Because domestic revenue are in so many avenues. Now,
Is
I'm
taxes
sure
one of them?
you don't want to ask your question directly. I'm sure you are referring to VAT.
Taxes
No.
I am
mean,
saying
what?
that.
Well,
Now,
it's a conversation that is going on. We can't run away from that.
You earn income from TV3. If TV3 increases your income tax, it will decrease your disposable income.
Absolutely.
A level 300 economic student will tell you that the tax multiplier is negative. So the more you increase tax, the more it will affect the economy negatively.
True.
So there is the way to spread. We have been talking about broadening the net.
Yes.
Spreading
it's a
it
chorus we've been singing
so that
for long,
everybody
long.
pays. So I am saying that if this current administration had brought a list of items, a list of avenues where we can raise revenue, and the VAT inclusive, then it could be, defended. But if you single out VAT, raise it from 17.5% to 21%, it's too high. Again, if they could, make it say just 1% increment or 2% increment, then we could still, talk about it in a very nice way, where we think that the effect on individuals will not be too much. But for 3 to 4% increment is too huge, for this state of the economy, because the economy is now picking up.
I see.
The growth rate is now picking up. The non-oil GDP is just
so there will
around
be no
5%.
justification for such a quantum of increase, really.
No, not at all. It's going to affect us. VAT is regressive. Regressive means it affects the poor more than it affects the low-income earners. So if you increase it too much, it's going to put pressure on you. And I understand that they need money to, undertake a number of, projects and programs that they have. But I'm saying that they should, in addition to the VAT, 1% or 2% increment, in addition to that, they should identify other ways of raising revenue, and not placing emphasis on VAT.
Maybe, Winslow, including cutting down on some of the wastage in the system. Because you see it, and clearly that's where the question will be that why do you come in asking for more when you are wasting so much? Winslow.
You see, cutting the wastage is easier to say than do. I think government has tried, but it's been a perennial problem, and it will not take one cycle to cut it. The thing is, VAT is one of the easiest taxes to collect.
Yeah.
So that is what you would naturally look
But
at.
also, it may be quite costly if you want to dwell on just that.
Exactly.
Okay, so we must be innovative in our ways of
Yes.
raising revenue. Let's not be too... you said lazy, but I
Who said lazy? I didn't say it.
But anyway, Winslow, there's a statement that just come through from the Bank of Ghana. I just want to run it by you before we get in. It says that they annul the acquisition of shares of ADB held by Bellstar Capital, Starmount Limited, that's Company Limited, SIC Financial Services, and EDC Investment, with relation to this whole Unibank ADB matter that came up. Now, this is the development. It's just come through from the central bank, actually, annulling the acquisition of these shares of over 50% by these 3 companies. The reason is that the Bank of Ghana said they did not know that these 3 companies they were related.
Yeah.
And so were able to acquire over 50% of the shares of ADB without the knowledge of the central bank. What are the implications for this?
What it means is that if they are reversed, then government becomes the majority shareholder and can take all the decisions that majority shareholders are supposed to take. The problem is with a banking institution, there are certain thresholds for ownership. If you go to below 5% to 5%, you need approval from Bank of Ghana. You go to 10% until you get to the 25% that they are talking about. So I think that wasn't done when the acquisitions were being done, because all of them needed to have Bank of Ghana approval. It wasn't done. They sort of used the back door to acquire the shares. And currently, Bank of Ghana is saying that they didn't go by the rules, so it will be reversed.
I see.
Which changes the terrain a bit, because ADB would now revert to government. I think when the current government came, they changed the MD because they are the majority shareholders.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So what happens to the shares held by these three? Annulled, you say, in the sense of the
yes,
word?
so it will be reversed and then it go back to Bank of Ghana.
It goes back to the Bank of Ghana.
Yes.
I see. That's just some clarity for you, gentlemen. So for you, final word in 30 seconds. There is really, you're proposing that government looks at other innovative ways of raising revenue.
Yes, that's my firm proposal, that we need money. There's every need for us to raise revenue.
Right.
Grant is going down, but the VAT is not the only way of raising revenue. There are other areas that we can look at, and I'm sure that when they list these areas and they inform Ghanaians the need to raise revenue and also finance certain projects, I'm sure Ghanaians will understand them and give them the necessary support.
Great stuff. Winslow.
And I'll say that, we've had history with VAT. It's created a lot of political problems for years. So I was surprised when I heard that VAT would be the one that would have a big chunk in there.
Officially, they have, you see, this will come up from certain persons who are closely associated with government. But you haven't heard the finance minister talk about it. So my sources in the ministry say, why don't you just hush and wait till Thursday and see what will happen?
No, but it looks very like...
I mean...
But I don't think it should be 21%.
It would definitely be 21 would be too much.
I don't think. There will be an increment, but maybe a marginal increment.
Absolutely.
I'm looking at, let's say, 19, 18.5.
Yeah, 18.5 should be fine.
You see, they say there's a tree proverb say, appointing an for you, so I see the cast. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us. Winslow Sakifio is the head of capital markets at First Bank. And then also, Edusa Kodie is an economist and a lecturer at the University of Ghana Department of Economics, also joining us in studio. I'm going to be back after this quick break. We'll get into the fisheries sector and have a conversation. Do stay. Welcome back to Business Focus here on TV3. Before we get into the discussion in studio, some spare parts dealers have been sharing with us their expectations ahead of the mid-year budget review to be presented by the finance minister on Thursday. Let's go to the Abossey Okai Spare Parts Hub to listen to them.
The budget review mid-year, what we would like the government to address now is the problem that we have with CTN, cargo tracking notes. There is a whole lot of a hula baloo about the implementation of the CTN, because when they wanted to start its implementation, a meeting was arranged between a GRA and GUTA. Yeah, and we told them that fine, if they want to implement the CTN, we don't have any problem about it, but we will do it at a no cost to the importer or the businessman, because already the businessman is saddled with a lot of tariffs and taxes. Like Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders, they have raised issues about it. GUTA has also raised issues about it. So they have to address all these problems before its implementation. As the acting chairman of the association, I can tell you that there hasn't been any increase of prices. But what we are seeing is that after the review of the budget, if nothing is done about it and we continue to see a further falling of the cedi, then we will have no option than to increase our prices.
Welcome back to Business Focus. So those were some spare parts dealers also sharing their expectations ahead of the media budget review to be presented by the finance minister. I talked about the fisheries sector and why you should be worried if you are indeed minded about the contribution of that particular sector to the GDP of the economy is being dwindling over the period. I'm going to show you some statistics and then the level of consumption that we have as a country of fish. Professor Dennis Wolanyo Aheto is with the University of Cape Coast Center for Coastal Management. We're going to have a conversation on that. But what you see on your screens right now is fish production and consumption in Ghana. And Ghana consumes over 950,000 metric tons of fish annually. And what you see there, as a matter of fact, Ghana produces less than 400,000 metric tons of fish. So there's a shortfall of about 550,000. That's what the analysis is. And the question is what we can do to bridge that gap and improve on the sector's contribution to gross domestic product of the economy. So that's the picture there. Professor Dennis Wolanyo Aheto is with the University of Cape Coast Center for Coastal Management. That's the Department of Fisheries, Aquatic Sciences, and then also the Director of Center for Coastal Management. He joins me in studio. Prof, thank you so much for making the time to be with us here. I also have Mr. Paul Bannerman. He's the chairman of the Closed Season Committee, Ministry of Fisheries and Aquaculture. Thank you, Mr. Bannerman, for your time this evening. We're indeed very grateful. Now, you saw that particular picture there. It clearly depicts what the situation is.
Yeah.
We know the problem. What can we do to improve the fishery sector's contribution to GDP? Prof.
Yeah. Good evening, Alfred, and it's a wonderful opportunity to be here. I think putting issues into perspective, it is really not the number of times fishers go to sea that enhances productivity, but then the few times you go and you're able to maximize your catch is what really matters and becomes relatively profitable for the fishers. And in as much as these issues have come up, listening to media, the media reports and all that, I think we need to put this issue into perspective in the sense that this is a fisheries management strategy. It is not a ban, as has been noted.
So what is it?
Well, it's just a period where the ministry, which is the lead agency in charge of fisheries issues in this country, has put some temporary closure on the sea in order to allow for stock replenishment. And as a matter of fact, if you look at our law, as far back as, the Fisheries Act in particular, which was promulgated in 2002,
right.
Section 84 clearly talks about the closed season and the need for it to be looked at as a management strategy. The Fisheries Management Plan reiterated that in 2015. And the science has really also provided important feedbacks on account of depleting stocks, especially for the small pelagics.
Right.
Now, in 1996 was when we really had our bumper harvest, if I may put it that way, where we had nearly, let me put it, I think the maximum sustainable yield was around 300,000 metric tons. As we speak, 20 years down the line, we're now talking about 20,000 metric tons. And actually, if you look at the science, if you look at the science, any time that you have your stocks or your landings, which goes around or hovers around 10% of your historical maximum, it means that you are near collapse. I mean, the system is near collapse. And what that means is that the sea must be abandoned, literally. It becomes literally unprofitable.
To replenish
the stock
of the fish in the sea. I mean, from the face of common sense, it makes sense that we should do this. But, Mr. Bannerman, what has accounted for? Has there been any research into why from 1996 till now we've had a rather drastic reduction in the fish production in this country from 300,000 to 20,000? This is alarming.
Thank you for this opportunity. Yes, there's been a lot of research. Catch assessment surveys have been done on a yearly basis to take inventory of what the fishers are landing, and more importantly, what we call the biomass of what is there, the weight of fish in our waters for the different species have been done mainly with the help of foreign vessels coming in our waters. Ghana has not had a research vessel since 2000.
Why?
However,
What happened to the one?
We had one since we've run 6 vessels since the 1960s, but this one had a little problem, right? And we're not able to revamp it in the shortest possible time, and therefore we've been relying on the goodwill of foreign vessels coming within our waters, especially a Norwegian vessel called Fridtjof Nansen. And they have been consistently doing surveys for us. And they also confirm that the amount of fish, especially our small pelagic, has been going down. Not only environmental factors having a toll on stocks, but also due to man-made activities. And man-made activities, some of them are the use of obnoxious methods in fishing, light fishing, the use of carbide and dynamite, undersized meshes, which we have been regularly informing the fishers. And the fishers themselves have been regularly telling us that it is this, they know the cause of the problem. They are prepared to help us mitigate some of the problems, and we need to come as a group, fishers and managers alike, to make sure that we can do something about the dwindling stocks. So it's natural factors, upwelling, uninterrupted patterns, and also man-made activities, which is a major cause of the decline.
Well, since you are the ministry, I want to find out, when you monitored, and I asked a question about research because then that informs us from a scientific perspective exactly what the picture looks like. So from 1996 till now, from 300,000 metric tons to 20,000. When you monitor the dwindling effect or stocks, what did you do about it till now that we have 20,000 from 300,000 in 1996?
Fine. That is where we came out with the fact that the decline is so drastic that we need to implement the management plan in the Act. So from 2013-2014, we had a series of stakeholder meetings with all the various fishers groups, inshore, artisanal, tuna, coming to a consensus, and all of them have agreed that the close season is one of the measures which will lead to replenishing the stocks. So it's something that we have been engaging the stakeholders over and over, but now we realize
what has been the outcome of those engagements, and how far has it been effective in solving this problem?
Well, it has been effective in the sense that they are aware. Their awareness creation is there for them to know that it is not only the environment, which is ozone layer depletion, sea surface temperature rising, but it is them who are doing what they shouldn't do. The awareness is also there that the FE, Fisheries Enforcement Unit, has been created to help solve some of these problems by sensitizing them, educating them. We've been arresting them, we've been fining them, we've been talking to them, and still we now realize that this is the time we need to really close the period of the sea for just 1 month, and then still engage them in further talks to see how best they can know that it's a compliance issue. Voluntary compliance from them will be what will help us all in this game.
Okay, now, Mr. Bana, I just want us to take a look, and viewers take a look at Ghana's fish stock, as I indicated earlier, and why you should be worried, because if from 1996 we had a bumper season of 300,000 tons of fish, and what, 22 years down the line, we're talking about 20,000 metric tons. Means there's been a depletion rate of about 280,000 metric tons. And clearly, it's a real concern, which I don't know what's been happening over the period. We've been sleeping on the situation. How come we've got into this point? Prof?
Yes. I think as a country, I'm not speaking for government, but I think that steps have been taken to really put a number of measures in place. I did speak about the Fisheries Act. I did speak about the Fisheries Management Plan, which clearly talks about the closed season. But by and large, if you look at Ghana's terrain in terms of our fisheries, July, from the period of July to September is the major fishing season, of which August becomes the peak. And it is interesting to know that this is when the pelagic fishery, talking about the sardines, the anchovies, the mackerels, this is the spawning period where they lay the eggs. So just to give you a simple scenario, if you have about 50,000 fish, okay, that are gravid, which means pregnant, that each bearing about 70,000 eggs, you can imagine the amount of fish that these gravid are going to produce. And as I mentioned, August is the peak of the spawning period. So if they are caught, you can imagine the state of depletion. In as much as that period may not be a long period, it is important to recognize that this is the time that the young ones are also breeding. And if we go in there and consider that as a bumper period, then we are depleting our stock. So going down the line, 1 year down the line, we should be able to then see a rebuilding of the stock, of course, coupled with enforcement of our regulations.
Let me just say that we invited Ni Abio Chirikwanda, who's the national president of the Canoe Fishermen Council. We've been trying to reach him since he agreed to come, but for some reason he's not here. To just have a balanced panel to understand the situation clearly. But when you engage the fishermen, Prof, the argument is that August is a bumper season for them, and so why do you then impose the closed season within the period when they're supposed to be making money?
I think we need to. There are some terminological challenges.
Help me out, please.
Well, when you say bumper, it means that there's a period of. But now there is no bumper harvest. This is a major. There are two seasons.
That's the period when they have.
So let me explain. There are two seasons. The minor season, which is the minor upwelling season, which is around February, March, thereabout, and then you have the major, which starts from July through August to September. So it's just a major season. It's not a bumper. Presently, there are no bumper harvests. Okay? Right. And then talking about even the issue of the ban, this is a fisheries management process, you know, which has taken place also in other countries like the Philippines, you have Morocco, you have Senegal, the Gambia. You know, so these are processes. In fact, closing the season is one, but you may also want to close the areas.
I see.
But usually, these are the first steps into implementing a broader programming when it comes to fisheries management. So we need to look at these issues from a perspective that even traditionally, the fishermen have implemented these kinds of strategies, but within narrow window periods. For instance, on Tuesdays or Thursdays, depending on the community. Absolutely. So over a period of a month, fishers don't go to work fishing over 4 days or a week.
Absolutely.
So on a larger scale, you may want to then look at this as a bigger fisheries management program where you want to close the sea for a period. You know, so I don't think that this is something that we should really be making so much noise about, because then the fishermen should
I'll probably find out from you why we are having this noise, because you talked about engagement with the stakeholders.
Exactly.
And the fisher folk are stakeholders in this industry.
Exactly.
So I'll find out what level of engagement you had before the ban. I'm going to go for this quick break.
Yeah.
I'll be back shortly. You still have your Business Focus to stay. Welcome back to Business Focus. Mr. Bannerman is the chairman of the closed season committee, Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture. Professor Dennis Olanyo Aheto is still with us in studio. Gentlemen, before we went for the break, I was asking about the level of engagement you had with because we've seen some resistance coming from some fisher folk, some parts of the country. What level of engagement did you have with them?
The level of engagement has been massive in the sense that we started not this year. We started earlier on, around 2013, 2014, when we started engaging them on the need for us to conserve our dwindling stocks. We've come out with a management plan, and before this management plan came into reality, we went from community to community, sensitizing them and talking to them about the need for them to come on board. And after that one, this was gazetted, and it's a plan which will help not only the artisanal fishers alone, but the industrial, where we have issues where violators of any regulations will be sanctioning. The need for us to have closed areas, closed seasons, improve research, improve monitoring, improve the collaboration between us and even the universities, such that we can all come on board to have a win-win situation.
Right. Prof, very finally.
Yes, I think that
the need for this.
So far, in as much as Mr. Bannerman has said that a lot has been done, I think it's still not enough. And then I think as a country, we should also look at it on a broader scale to involve other sectors. You know, the security, the Navy. This is a clearly national crisis, and we need to involve the security agencies. We need to involve the Navy, the Fisheries Enforcement Unit, and other state agencies to support. We should not just leave this within the ambit of the Fisheries Ministry alone, because elsewhere in other countries, issues of fisheries are actually handled at the interministerial level, and this is something that from the University of Cape Coast we think that should be facilitated as far as these issues are concerned. We also would need to build the capacity of journalists to do effective reportage on some of these issues, and I think from next week the Center for Coastal Management will be championing some of these activities for journalists and fishermen to educate them on the science of this process, that is really not a bad thing, that they should all support it to make it succeed. But most importantly, we should not go, the fishermen should not go into illegal fishing activities right after this closing season. Otherwise, all that we are doing now, or all that the country is doing, will come to nothing.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time to be here. Paul Bannerman is the chairman of Closed Season Committee, Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture. Professor Dennis Wulanyo Aheto is with the University of Cape Coast Center for Coastal Management, and then also Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences. My name is Alfred Okansi. On behalf of the rest of the team, I want to say thank you so much for spending your time with us here on Business Focus. Have a good evening.